Tonight on Ukraine Today. Year in review. Where did Ukrainian drones strike in 2025 and what did it mean for Russia's war? Destroyed occupiers. In 2025, Russia lost 40% more soldiers on the battlefield than in any other year since the full-scale invasion began. Situation on the battlefield. What is happening right now on the hottest frontline directions? Lies and bluff. From made-up Kremlin stories to Russian scare tactics aimed at intimidating the West. All this and more, right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Thank you. We're standing on the doorstep of a new year, so today will be about summaries, but not only summaries, because tomorrow it is a new day. Yes, a new year, but still under the same full-scale war that Russia started against Ukraine. So, with faith in Ukraine's defense forces and in Ukraine's victory, let's move on to the news. Ukrainian drones struck an oil refinery in Tuapse in Russia's Krasnodar region last night. At the same time, oil depots are burning in the Yaroslavl region and also in the temporarily occupied territory of Luhansk region. Russian special forces were also hit, and no, this is far from all the bad news for the enemy.
A pre-New Year's fireworks display from the Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces. They struck a storage site as well as a location for equipping and preparing launches of strike UAVs at the Donetsk airport. FPV-2 drones also hit a warehouse near Mangush in the Donetsk region.
This drone was developed not so long ago, but it has undergone testing and qualification. It is now being used, and as you can see, it is being used very effectively. On the front line, there are good results.
The UAV forces of the Ukrainian armed forces have confirmed the destruction of several enemy military targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. Among them are the enemy's Valdai radar station, a command post for a radar reconnaissance complex, and a naval unmanned boat. More than 120 Special Forces soldiers from the 14th Special Purpose Brigade of the Russian GRU have been eliminated. This was carried out by the SBS together with the SOO as a result of a planned operation conducted on the night of December 26th. The operation took place in the temporarily occupied settlement of Berdyansk, Donetsk region.
As of today, our highly skilled and dedicated pilots are truly among the very best in the entire world, without any exaggeration whatsoever. And the sophisticated tactics and innovative strategy they meticulously develop, based on their many extensive years of invaluable combat experience gained continuously since the year 2022, are consistently showing exceptionally good and promising results.
The results of the work of the Unmanned Systems Forces are published by their commander Robert Brody, callsign Madhyar, who, in June 2022, while on the Kherson front, created a separate aerial reconnaissance unit called Madhyar's Birds. Thus, according to the military, began the combat journey of this unique technological unit within the armed forces of Ukraine, which, we should add, still does not let the enemy sleep peacefully to this day. Citing Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi, military correspondent Yulia Kirienko reports that Russian forces control approximately half of Pokrovsk. The defense forces state that the main enemy forces are concentrated in the southern districts of the city, where they are being precisely targeted and destroyed by Ukrainian drones. Meanwhile, in the city center and closer to the northern districts, Russians are dying in close combat under the pressure of Ukrainian soldiers.
It's not the defense land which our guys built with their own hands that they're holding, and I think they will keep holding it until the moment there is something to cling to and something to hold on to. Our Titans will stand their ground to the very end, and now Putin's task while he is negotiating with Trump is that these ridiculous assaults have started again. Why? Because in order for Putin to show that he is now on the offensive in the Dnipro area, that everything is going well for him, that everything is working out, and that Ukrainians are incapable. This is what motivates the Russian army. He will now use these negotiations to try to get Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia regions handed over to him.
According to analysts, the settlement of Hulyapol in the Zaporizhzhia direction is located in the gray zone. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces are present there. Sometimes they're literally in neighboring basements. Fighters from the 116th Brigade showed what the occupiers had ravaged: Kupiansk, Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian armed forces have almost completely liberated the city. Putin has been boasting about its capture since November.
Russian forces attacked two residential apartment buildings in Odessa. 4 people were injured, 3 of them children. Enemy drones also damaged civilian infrastructure. Parts of the city were left without electricity, water and heating. And that was not all. Another apartment building was hit, this time in Bila Tsarkva. Windows were blown up, balconies damaged. Miraculously, no killed or wounded. Ukrainian soldiers are sending New Year greetings from the Pokrovsk direction. The situation there remains unstable, but the defense forces are holding their positions. Over the past year alone, Russia lost tens of thousands of soldiers. This is reported by the BBC. So, what did the terrorist state actually gain for this massive human losses? Spoiler alert, very little. Here are the details.
There are 3 things you can watch endlessly: how fire burns, how water flows, and how the Russian military command reports on the capture of Kupiansk.
The Zapad group has liberated the city of Kupiansk, and they continue to destroy the formations of the armed forces of Ukraine, which are surrounded on the left bank of the Oskol River. In the Kupiansk direction, assault units of the 68th Motorized Rifle Division of the 6th Army have completed the liberation of the city of Kupiansk.
So that's it, it's completely finished.
The military operation to capture the city of Kupiansk became one of the Russian army's biggest failures of the outgoing year. For more than a month now, Putin and his military commanders have been relentlessly trying to prove to Russians and the whole world that the army has captured and controls this city, in the Kharkiv region. In reality, things are going catastrophically badly for the Russian army there.
It appears that most of Kupiansk is controlled by Ukrainian forces. There are scattered groups of Russian soldiers in the city itself, but only in small numbers. They are isolated, cut off, and surrounded.
But there were few such successes for the Ukrainian armed forces in 2025. In the outgoing year, the Russian army, albeit slowly, continued to advance on Ukrainian territory. And although the occupiers were advancing, the Russian armed forces still failed to turn the tide of the fighting in 2025.
According to the Ukrainian analytical portal Deep State, in 2024, the Russian army managed to capture 3,654 square kilometers. This figure includes their advances in the Kursk region, and in 2025, from January 1st to December 24th, it was 4,727. Again, this includes the Kursk operation.
Russia has relied on infiltration tactics and offensive actions using light motorized vehicles. That's why in 2025 less armored equipment was lost, but a lot more people. In December, Russian troops slowed down significantly because of heavy losses over the past few months. American military analyst Michael Kaufman believes that 2025 turned out better for Ukraine than expected. And despite major problems with personnel shortages, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to successfully conduct combat operations against the so-called Second Army in the world.
If we look at manpower, this year most likely more than 90% of the contract soldiers that Russia recruited each month went to cover losses. Russia will no longer be able to build up its forces as it did in the previous year. If current trends continue, they will face problems with staffing their units and with having enough manpower. Next year. Michael Kaufman, military analyst.
Despite having advantages in almost all military components, the Russian army failed to realize them on the battlefield. The pace of advancement compared to 24 has increased, but it is still negligible compared to the resources spent.
Russia, having a significant advantage in almost all military components, personnel, artillery, armored vehicles, aerial bombs, missiles, Shaheds, is unable to properly capitalize on it. As a result, there is some progress, but it comes at the cost of heavy losses and overall rather low effectiveness, according to analysts from the conflict intelligence team.
In almost 4 years of war, Putin has still not managed to fully capture the Donbas. At least a third of all daily clashes have taken place in this direction. And to this day, a quarter of Donetsk region remains under Ukrainian control. And the Russian army is simply grinding down its own forces there. This is now Russia's key bargaining position. Ukrainian forces are supposed to withdraw from Donetsk region since the occupier has not achieved success there.
Maybe they can do it, but to achieve that, they would need to spend a huge amount of resources and a lot of time. And they will use any opportunity to deceive. Their advance is extremely difficult for them. For the opposition of the so-called Second Army in the world, as they claim, these are colossal losses. These are enormous resources being drawn in. These are colossal resources that are being committed.
Almost the entire year of 2025, the Ukrainian armed forces spent on the front in a defensive posture. But Ukrainian defenders struck back hard at Russian rear areas and declared a real heated war on the Shadow Fleet and Russia's oil industry. In the European part of Russia in 2025, air raid sirens sounded in almost every region. Over the past year, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to take out more than 20% of Russia's oil refining industry. The Ukrainian Navy has completely closed off the Black Sea to the Russian Navy and has even started hunting down tankers belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet. This is expected to deprive the Kremlin of about 10 to 15% of all its oil revenues. The year 2025 was difficult both for Ukraine and for our army. But it turned out much better than many had predicted. Many military analysts
Over the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 1,000 occupiers, killed and wounded. That brings the total Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,207,910 personnel. In addition, over the last day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 4 armored combat vehicles, 33 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has signed a law under which Russians will be sent to the front lines throughout the entire next year. Details and evidence in the report.
The recruitment of cannon fodder for the front will continue all year round. The Russian dictator has signed a decree for continuous military conscription in 2026.
According to this law, people will receive electronic draft notices all year round. Now, and indeed throughout the entire year, individuals will be obligated to present themselves before official medical boards and attend comprehensive draft commissions for thorough evaluations and assessments.
At the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense claims that, as before, conscripts will be sent to the troops and military units twice a year. In other words, the Kremlin has decided to expand the resources for fulfilling the conscription plan, so that as many conscripts as possible can be brainwashed and sent to war.
All of this is carefully done so that before individuals are sent to the unit, there is already sufficient time to convince them. Voluntarily or by force, they tell all sorts of tall tales like, well, you're going to serve anyway, right? You'll serve a year anyway, so why waste time? Let's sign a contract, you'll get paid, you'll be stationed in the rear. Well, we all know these stories, and basically, this is the time the enlistment officers will have to quickly convert conscripts into contract soldiers, and accordingly, contract soldiers can then be fully used in any combat operations. They haven't gone through it.
Officially, from January 1st to December 31st, 2026, Russia plans to conscript 261,000 people aged 18 to 30. Since the start of the full-scale war, the Russian Ministry of Defense has been constantly increasing its conscription targets. For example, in the spring of 2023, 147,000 were conscripted, in 2024, 150,000, and the spring draft of 2025 became the largest in the past 15 years. 160,000, the conscription targets are relentlessly increasing. And now, the period during which the military enlistment office can hunt for and pressure conscripts is also
being extended, and its reach is continuously expanding, encompassing a broader scope of influence and impact. For those individuals who are severely and gravely wounded, it's often a case of desertion or simply being tragically killed. Well, you could also surrender and become a prisoner of war. So basically, these are the ways out of a contract.
The increase in the number of conscripts, forced signing of contracts, and laws on perpetual conscription are all consequences of massive losses in the war. After all, as long as Putin doesn't want to end the so-called special operation, the Ukrainian armed forces eliminate hundreds of thousands every year. Occupiers on the front line.
For the first time in a long period in recent months, according to intelligence reports, including those from our Western allies, the replenishment of personnel among the occupiers does not make up for the losses on the line of contact.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it, so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. One of Russia's biggest lies in recent days, the fairy tale about an alleged attempt to strike Putin's residence, appears to have backfired. Le Monde reports that in Paris, officials see no evidence of a so-called Ukrainian attack. It seems the Kremlin lies were believed only by those who wanted to believe them.
Ukrainian drones attacked that very golden residence of Putin in Valdai. This was stated by the head of Russia's foreign ministry, Lavrov. He added that 91 drones were allegedly shot down successfully and that there would be immediate retaliation for the attack.
Such reckless actions will not go unanswered. The targets for retaliatory strikes and the timing of their execution by the Russian armed forces have been determined. Given the complete transformation of the criminal Kiev regime, which has now adopted a policy of state terrorism, Russia's negotiating position will be revised.
Why allegedly? Because there is no evidence to support the claims of the lying Russian criminals, and the president of Ukraine has outright denied the attack.
Now, the Russians have apparently invented a fake story about an alleged strike on some residents of the Russian dictator, so that they have an excuse to continue attacks on Ukraine, particularly strikes on Kyiv, as well as to refuse to take the necessary steps to end the war. A typical deceitful tactic of the Russians, who have already struck Kyiv before, including the building of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine.
The propagandists, as if on cue, began to echo Lavrov in unison, emphasizing that now Russia absolutely must refuse to engage in peace negotiations.
I'm speaking now. Both the US administration and many others are focusing their attention in order essentially to save what remains of Ukraine. Let's call things by their proper names. And right at this very crucial moment in time, when important points are being thoroughly discussed, when detailed plans are being carefully debated, when precise words are being meticulously chosen, this, excuse me, utterly bloody, wildly frenzied, and completely unruly tourist rabble is busily and actively undermining all peace efforts.
Putin immediately rushed to complain to Trump, and the latter was simply appalled. And really, what an outrage it is to strike at the supply lines of a war criminal who has wiped dozens of cities and hundreds of thousands of innocent people off the face of the earth.
I don't like this. It's not good. I found out about it this morning. Do you know who told me? President Putin? He said that he was attacked. Don't forget, it was I who stopped the Tomahawk incident. I didn't want that to happen because we're negotiating right now, and it's a very sensitive period. It's one thing to go on the offensive, but it's something else entirely to attack his home. Now is not the right time for any of this. It shouldn't be done. I'm very angry about this.
According to experts, such a statement may have been made deliberately because after the meeting between Trump and Zelensky, the Russian dictator realized that, as they say, the ball is now in his court. And now he either has to agree to peace or come up with a new excuse for why not.
If the Kiev authorities are unwilling to resolve the matter peacefully, we will accomplish all the tasks before us. During the special military operation, by military means.
But this, by the way, as well. There is a problem for us since it is quite obvious that the Russians are preparing new massive strikes, most likely around New Year's. And they will use this case, this fake, the supposed attack on Putin's residence, perhaps even as a justification, for example, for striking the government quarter or other significant sites for Ukraine in order to once again talk about retaliation. And this whole favorite story of theirs.
And overall this suits us because it moves toward achieving the goals of the special military operation by military means in the course of armed struggle.
Of course, it all looks utterly absurd. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers are supposed to keep dying, and millions of people in the rear are supposed to tighten their belts, all for the sake of Putin's multi-billion-dollar palace, which he has gilded entirely with budget money.
You don't live my life, and you don't understand that it's only about security issues. It's just that when a person is far removed from this, they simply don't notice it at all. This is an attempt at escalation, but if such weapons are used to strike Russian territory, the response will be very serious, if not overwhelming. Let them think about that.
But one thing is absolutely clear. Putin doesn't want negotiations or peace, and he will do everything possible to distract Trump's attention, no matter how foolish it may seem. And obviously no matter how it looks.
And when the world refuses to believe Putin, the Kremlin immediately turns to threats. That is likely why Russia's so-called defense ministry announced that the Oreshnik missile system had allegedly gone on combat duty in Belarus.
Belarus has finally bowed down to Russia. Moscow and Minsk no longer pretend that this is about exercises or a temporary presence. Now, officially, the Republic has turned into Putin's military staging ground.
I order all of you immediately take up your combat duty.
The intercontinental ballistic missile system Oreshnik, capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, has been put on combat duty on the territory of Belarus. The occupiers reported on a ceremonial event with the formation of personnel and the raising of the flag of the strategic missile forces. The Russian Ministry of Defense noted that Belarus had created all the necessary conditions in advance for combat duty and for the accommodation of Russian soldiers.
We are mastering new areas for combat. Reconnaissance of new areas is being conducted. Scheduled training sessions are being held there in accordance with the assigned tasks.
To service the Oreshnik, the country has deployed launch crews, communications units, security and power supply divisions, as well as other specialized personnel. In fact, this amounts to the permanent deployment of Russian strategic weaponry on Belarusian territory, with a full cycle of combat readiness support.
Our strategic defense is also ensured by our military cooperation, first and foremost with the Russian Federation. That is why Belarus and Russia are implementing a set of strategic deterrence measures. This includes the deployment of the Russian component of the regional troop grouping on our territory. In the event of an escalation of the conflict, several tens of thousands of armed forces stationed in Western Russia are designated to immediately join the military struggle as a second echelon. Belarus goes first, we need to respond. After that, we are supported by the Russian Federation. This is precisely what constitutes the regional grouping of troops and the tactical nuclear weapons that we have brought back to Belarus. In addition, the first positions have been equipped with the Oreshnik missile system.
Of course, the exact location of the system's deployment is not officially disclosed. However, American researchers have identified the likely location of the Oreshnik, the former Krychev 6 airfield in the east of the Mogilev region of Belarus, just 4 kilometers from the Russian-Belarusian border and 180 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Analysis of satellite images has revealed restored railway infrastructure and new concrete shelters on the runway prepared for launchers. Experts estimate that a maximum of 2 or 3 launchers could be stationed there, rather than a full-fledged missile regiment. Ukraine, for its part, harbors no illusions. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Kiev has the exact coordinates of the Oreshnik deployment in Belarus and has already shared this information with Western partners for threat assessment.
Intelligence has obtained more details on this matter, and it is important that our partners are also aware of this and take it into account in their defensive measures. We believe that the aggressive proliferation of such weapons poses a global threat and sets a dangerous precedent. I have instructed to prepare response options together with our partners.
The deployment of Russian missiles in Belarus is not about strengthening the front or about defense. It is an attempt to expand the geography of fear, to draw Minsk even deeper into the Kremlin's military adventure, and once again to remind the West of nuclear blackmail as a tool of pressure, particularly during negotiations.
In this way, Lukashenko wants to emphasize his own agency. By the way, a recent article appeared in the Wall Street Journal where John Cole claimed that he supposedly offered Lukashenko the chance to join the club of strong states rather than the club of outcasts. And here, in fact, Lukashenko is striving to join this club of outcasts, such as Iran, North Korea, Myanmar. Just recently, we saw footage of North Korea showing off a nuclear submarine, or more likely, a fake of that submarine. For him, it's important to show that he's a major player in Europe. Fear me, and if you fear me, then that's basically blackmail. You'll have to talk to me. That's his philosophy. But he remains, has been, and will continue to be an ally of the Russian Federation. By the way, here's a question. Who will have the control button for this Oreshnik or potential tactical nuclear weapons? Well, certainly not Lukashenko. If this control button isn't with Lukashenko, then he becomes a hostage to the Russian Federation, to the aggressive policies of Russia. Russia will make the decision to use this offensive type of weapon, but the retaliation will hit Belarusian territory. Lukashenko persistently, methodically, and systematically is painting an even bigger target on the country's territory.
At the same time, it's important to understand that such systems do not change the balance of power on the battlefield in Ukraine. They do not solve the problem of the Russian army's exhaustion, do not compensate for failures at the the front and are not capable of stopping strikes on Russian military and energy infrastructure. But they work perfectly on television as a signal that escalation is possible.
First and foremost, this is a threat, as I, as well as the President of Ukraine, have said to the countries of Western Europe, because, as experts say, the Oreshnik can strike at a distance of 5,000, even 5,500 kilometers. So we're not talking about nearby targets, but most likely about Western European countries.
The Oreshnik is not frightening to anyone. Moreover, with this type of missile, in order for it to fly properly, you understand, right? It first has to take off and then, naturally, lower its altitude. And this, in my opinion, for the Oreshnik is 600 kilometers. Well, when I spoke with military experts, they said it's a 600-kilometer dead zone. So even if this Oreshnik is aimed at something, it's definitely not at Poland, but rather further away, like Germany or somewhere else. But again, there's Kaliningrad, from which it could also be launched, and I'm 100% sure that our Western partners know perfectly well how to shoot this junk down.
There is little publicly available official information about the Oreshnik. As Putin stated, it is a medium-range ballistic missile. The first and so far only combat use occurred in November 2024 during a strike on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. And whatever the case may be, the Oreshnik is not a battlefield weapon, but rather a tool of political and military blackmail. Each new deployment and each such placement does not bring the Kremlin closer to negotiations, but only increases the risk of retaliatory measures. And the longer Moscow and Minsk bet on escalation, the higher the price they will have to pay, not only on the front lines, but also in terms of international isolation.
Finally, a bit about the future. The United Arab Emirates has announced plans to acquire a 30% stake in the Ukrainian weapons manufacturing company Firepoint. This is reported by the BBC. According to the broadcasting corporation's sources, the deal is valued at around $760 million. That's all for today. Happy upcoming New Year. Thank you for watching us this year. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and see you in 2026.